What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So Starfield got its official FSR3 update. This was available in beta for a couple of weeks, but now it's just out in the normal game updates and ready to go. So everybody can jump in and take a look at that and try. Previously, you had to go in here to properties, go to betas, and opt in for the beta version to try frame generation. But that's no longer the case. You can go in here, click on FSR3, turn on frame gen, and take advantage of that technology here, which is great here on the Legion Go and over on the Steam Deck with Windows. And actually works really good on the Steam Deck with Windows. So it is unfortunate that frame generation still isn't working on SteamOS for Starfield here. It does work on Windows. It does work with this hardware. It's not a hardware limitation, but it doesn't work here when it comes to SteamOS. I'll go in here and turn on frame gen, and it just makes the frame times a mess. It never is able to get the additional frame rate, and it just doesn't function the way that it should, of course, here. And I know we've seen this with other games, and this isn't really a surprise or new information, but I was just kind of hoping I would jump in here to SteamOS and see Starfield's frame gen working, but it's not working properly here. So if you do want to take advantage of frame generation on your Steam Deck, as of right now, at least for me, the only way I know of would be to run Windows to get that working. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at Windows on Steam Deck. Then we'll take a look at the Legion Go and what kind of performance we have when it comes to frame generation versus no frame generation here on Starfield. So we'll get started here on Windows 11 with the Steam Deck. And while you can't take advantage of frame generation, there still is FSR3 and Intel's XeSS, which is nice. But some side-by-side comparisons here of some with and without frame generation at 800p here on the Steam Deck at low with 4 gigs of RAM set in the BIOS is actually a pretty nice improvement in the game overall. There can sometimes be some increased input latency and things like that in games with frame gen, and we'll talk more about that here in just a minute. But just side-by-side going around some of these tougher to run areas, Aquila here is another one where we'd be around 17, 18 FPS, and we come up into the 30s. Now, the lower your FPS is, of course, the worse frame gen technically is going to work or feel, because you have less frames to go from as it generates those fake frames, but ultimately still felt better than without it, and certainly looked better. As we pan across here, it was actually a pretty smooth experience when it came to frame gen being on, and again, pretty good frame times, no major stutter issues like I might anticipate, especially here on the Steam Deck. And in combat, talking about latency again, I didn't really notice much in extra latency when it came to playing here on Starfield. I have noticed it in some games with frame generation, but it didn't appear to be too bad here. And I ultimately definitely preferred frame gen being on when it came to combat and trying to aim and using the Steam Deck controls and all of that. It worked really well. So I couldn't really complain about additional input latency. It felt much smoother and better to ultimately play this way than it did without frame generation. So definitely something nice to see here. I do wish SteamOS was able to take advantage of this, hopefully in the future, but we do have those other options there. And of course, mods and things like that we can deal with. Now, coming over to the Legion Go with the Z1 Extreme, performance also, of course, has helped a lot with frame gen, even more here as we have plenty of headroom. Now, I'll actually be at 1200p with this and only 20 watts. There's plenty of room to play here when it comes to getting more performance, but this will give us something consistent to look at. Again, with some side-by-sides and just seeing the performance with and without frame generation here. And again, better frame times, felt better to play, didn't notice a lot of additional input latency, and running really well here on the Legion Go. Now, my Ally's out for RMA, and it'll be back soon, so I didn't get to test that in this video, but being the Z1 Extreme, I would imagine I could run 900p or 1080p with frame gen and get really good performance and experience there as well. But as soon as I get that back, it'll be included in the videos again. So that's why we're only doing the Legion Go. Even though it's similar hardware, I do like to usually test on both. But yeah, it's really nice seeing Starfield finally get this FSR3 update, get frame generation, and see how well it's actually working over on Steam Deck with Windows and here on the Legion Go as well, and really helping that performance. Again, surprised at the frame times, not getting those huge stutters, and not some games it just seems like when you pan across the screen you're moving, you kind of really see those frames and what frame generation is doing, and not really noticing a lot of that like flickering or ghosting or loss of frames or stuttering here that I've noticed sometimes in frame generation with DLSS or with AMD here. So all in all, pretty good. And on the Legion Go, same thing. If we pan across here, it's pretty nice out in space as it gets us up to that 60 FPS or above here. And on the 144 Hz screen, as we start to go above 60 FPS, that's when frame generation really starts to shine. And again, in combat, without any frame gen here on the Z1 Extreme, we're in the 20s and 30s, depending on where we're at. just as an example here, and ultimately felt way better switching over to frame gen here. Didn't notice, again, much in the way of additional input latency with this game. Felt much better to play. Certainly looks a lot smoother here on the screen. So again, no major complaints when it comes to running the frame generation, and input latency, using the controller, that type of thing seems to be really worked out well here in Starfield. I've had some problems with past games in frame gen, but seems like the implementation here is working really well. No major complaints, and it looks pretty clean as well. But I think that's about going to do it. Performance for frame gen and Starfield here on the Legion Go is really nice. Again, I think it'll be really good on the Ally and the other Windows handhelds as well. This is a great update to come to the game, and to see this as an in-game feature rather than just an add-on with the driver or software tends to work a bit better. And on Steam Deck, it's great to see this working on Windows and on the Steam Deck hardware. I just wish we could use it in SteamOS as well. All right, guys, thanks a lot for coming to check out the video as always. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.